that way.
Got it. Understood. And just thinking about the different aspects that you want to have in a product that you're building, I think that's a great segue to move into our first sort of like core subject matter discussion, right? Which is to try and understand, what really makes a consumer product go viral, all of these different elements that people think about in terms of growth loops, network effects. How do you sort of design a product to function, right, in some of these capabilities? Would
Mm-hmm.
also love to understand from you, what are the different sort of like mechanics that have proven sort of like effective, that in the different roles that you've done to try and drive some of these growth loops and make things go viral. So I think that'd be a great
So
starting.
yeah, so one thing what I have learned is, see, virality is generally not uh, hoped for, right? When you are actually designing and building the product, you need to build for the virality and growth loops, right? So one thing I can quote you is LinkedIn as one of the best example, right? So when they actually built the product, they built with that growth loop, like adding your address book itself is a great viral measure where you just are actually pushing the user, and then as the network increases, that's the value that they are going to gain, right? So and people are going to add value faster. So that's the, like, taking them to the aha moment is something which is the fastest approach, right? And then fast track this acquisition and engagement. Like growth loops is greater than funnel, right? It's kind of, for me, it's sum of the parts, right? While you have acquisition, and other stages in the user journey, like how can you unlock those stages faster, right? So for example, uh, let me take grow as an example, right? So how can you onboard the users faster, and how can you take them to the value faster, right? And second, let's take WhatsApp as an example, right? So for example, like there are like replies, how can you pull people back to the products so that actually they can engage better, right? And I think one of the biggest aspects, at least with respect to social product, is the networks, right? Having like-minded people or having people to add value is one. And when it comes to like e-commerce kind of the products, right? So I feel selection has been like a greater network puller, and having the right selection at the right price has been a great lever for getting the viral loop kick in, right? So I think identifying what the user want, again, I'm going back to that thing. So when you're building a social product, and whenever the user comes in, like what value you want to add, because each social product will have a different use case. Like LinkedIn has a professional use case, and Facebook and Instagram might be like more of fun and entertainment use cases. So how can you build a product and bring in that virality and the value that they can get in a faster way is what I have noticed. And when you think about the overall strategies that I have noticed, right? So basically, you need to instrument that loop. So when the user comes in, like what is the best way for them to instrument, right? What is the best way for them to unlock that virality? Like show that upfront so that people can take value over it, and then reduce the friction, right? As one thing you need to see is like what are all the data instrumentation, and tracking the data is very very important, especially when you're building a consumer product, and when people are thinking like growth PMs, right? So growth PMs should obsess over the data, and then they should prune and they should reduce the friction at every point so that people are moving to the next stage faster. And the third one I have noticed is clustering the users. Say instead of growing and spreading yourself too thin, right? Maybe like there can be one place like LinkedIn focused more on professionals because it's a proper cluster. And even when you start thinking about e-commerce product, right? You start in a cluster where you can actually kick that flywheel off and then move from there. So that has been the approach that I have noticed, which has helped in the growth viral loops.
Got it. Understood. And maybe the other thing that I also wanted to understand, you said something very importantly right now, which is about, looking at the data, understanding where and why customers are maybe getting stuck in the sort of journey in the process. Any thoughts on
Mm-hmm.
how you can go about doing that? Like, how does one measure sort of like, success, failure, try to diagnose these aspects of where are the different points where I can reduce friction, right? Like maybe that one additional login page should be reduced, or that one additional sort of like data entry aspect, if we can pull that from the back end rather than requiring the customer to say upload something like a bank statement, right? And rather do an account
Mhm.
aggregator pull, it makes the process easier. So how do you sort of like go about actually diagnosing, which are the different parts of the onboarding journey and the user journey
Got
where
it.
you might want to make changes?
So one thing, at least what we have done at Trove. So one, if we go from the theoretical aspect of it, right? There is this acquisition, activation, engagement, retention, and monetization funnel, right? So each funnel has its own approach and own metrics that we are tracking. At the same time, somebody should not optimize locally for it. However, looking at it holistically will help them to have a broader view. One is, for example, at LinkedIn, we used to have like a engaged users as the overall metric, which actually brought in the like daily or weekly engaged users is one which we have, which brings the all five stages together. So, and to answer your question on how to identify the and prune the state structures, right? So, one thing what I have noticed, especially at Grow, right, one of the biggest things that we bet on was bringing in new users onto the platform, because investment has been kind of people are kind of skeptical and afraid of investing. And how can we bring the major investment? I think we have done that well, because we actually made it very, very simple for them. So one thing is, you only we intentionally removed a lot of things for the users so that they can focus on what is that need to be done at that point in time. So for example, instead of overcomplicating and throwing in three options on a page, we were we were okay to have multiple steps, but each step should be what is it, atomic in nature.
Right,
Like,
right.
you should know what needs to be done at that step and what success means for completing that step. So while it might sound counterintuitive where we have introduced more steps, but it has actually helped us when where people know that okay, at each step this is the action I need to take and this is the success or the failure. And to add to that, so it has also helped us in uh, giving very contextual support responses to the customer, because each page we know what are all the failures that will happen and what are all the actions or the steps the customers should make. So while pruning is one, sometimes adding and making it more atomic also is a step where people can actually use. At the end of the day, as I mentioned, customers should know like what they are doing so that they can move to the next step.
Got it. Understood. And on the topic of virality and this experience piece, maybe just the last question before moving on to the next section is, how do you measure, right? Is there a way to,
Mm,
for example, tell if a product is about to inflect, right? Are there
mm,
certain things that you notice in either downloads, in user behavior, in social media chatter about the product, so on and so forth, which can give the product team, the growth team, some indications that, hey, we're really, really about to take off, or we're seeing those early signs that we're about to go viral. I've always
got
been
it.
curious to understand, when and how the people who are building viral products get to know that our product is going to go viral. That'd be super interesting to get your take on.
Got it. Got it. So as we know, like there are like different stages in the funnel, right? So acquisition is one major step where which segment we are acquiring, because at the end of the day, the cost of acquisition is very, very key for us. So that is one of the major guardrail. And what is like efficient users we need to acquire, like what kind of users we are acquiring. So that's the major measurement for the acquisition as a. The next one is activation, like time to value is one of the major thing that I would measure and say that if the user comes in, like how soon they are able to download or sign up to a particular product. And also that this is where the aha moment comes into play when it comes to grow, where people are actually going to their stocks and say they are creating a watch list for them. The engagement aspect of it, like that's where the DAO, MAU, the active users comes into play. And it should not be, make it more value driven rather than making it addictive. So for example, LinkedIn, the value driven is because the content is something where people find value. In Grow, the way they invest and what kind of stocks they are able to search. So those are all some of the value that they are able to show, and seeing the right information for every stock is a value. So those are all some of the value which gives you the engagement, which actually show that, okay, what is the depth of engagement and what is the breadth of engagement that they. And then retention is how people are coming onto the platform. So one thing, if you still are bringing in people through coupons, then that means it's the product has not cracked, right? That means people should come organically for the value. Maybe through, you can drive a lot of these engagement levers, but people should come organically and try to take the value, and they should be able to bring more users onto this. And the final part is monetization. I think all these things, in my opinion, can be a freemium approach. And then once you see a lot of users, and make the users unlock and move to the monetization approach rather than pushing monetization, or make monetization as a part of the product itself. Like how Grow does it in the sense that, okay, there is no absolute monetization as such, right? So whenever you buy and sell, the transaction actually monetizes for them. So transaction is the value, and the value actually is monetizing for the organization. So that way they are keeping the product free for the user. So those are all some of the things. And somewhere we need to bring all these 5 stages together and measure, right? So as I mentioned, like a weekly engaged user. So we actually at LinkedIn, we used to measure contributors. Like contributors are people who actually post content and who actually are commenting on the post. So we actually measure that. That actually encompasses all these 5 metrics, and that metric should show the growth rather than measuring at each stage. You are measuring one holistic metric, which is, if it is growing, that actually shows that, okay, hey, your multiple stages of your acquisition and the growth funnel is working. So that's how I tend to measure for the any consumer product.